Hello and welcome to Insomniac Dose. You're welcome to comment your city and the time below. I always enjoy reading them. If you find these stories interesting, please consider subscribing. Let's start tonight's story. I took the job at the dam because I needed to disappear for a while. Not the dramatic kind of disappearing. No fake passport or border crossing. Just the quiet erasure that comes from working nights in a place nobody thinks about anymore. The Hillcrest River Dam sits 2 hours north of any town worth naming, tucked into wooded hills like a secret someone forgot to keep. Officially, it's decommissioned. A relic. They keep one person on site to monitor for flooding, to make sure the spillways don't clog, and to file reports nobody reads. That's what the job posting said. That's what I told myself I believed. My name is Mason Hart, and I'm not supposed to be writing this down, but I need to track what's real. My memory has started doing something I don't trust, slipping sideways, offering two versions of the same moment like a deck of cards shuffled wrong. I grew up in this county. I remember a field trip here when I was 11 to the river station, they called it, then. I remember standing on a catwalk with my class, the roar of water below, the smell of wet concrete. I remember the trip ending early. Adults whispering. A classmate, Sarah Eng, went missing for 10 minutes. When she came back, she wouldn't speak. She transferred schools a week later. Nobody explained why. I don't know why I'm thinking about Sarah now. Maybe because I'm standing in the same place she stood 20 years later. And the air feels identical. Cold. Expectant. The dam is strange in a way I can't describe without sounding paranoid. It's not one building. It's 3 zones stitched together like organs from different bodies. The control house is newer, corporate, sterile, with keypads and security cameras and motivational posters about safety culture. It hums with fluorescent certainty. The spillway walk is open to the elements, a catwalk of metal grates suspended over churning water, fog rising in columns like something breathing underneath. And below, everything. The service tunnels, old concrete corridors painted with arrows that don't match the map, lit by caged bulbs that flicker in sequence, as if passing a message. My supervisor, Dennis Rourke, met me at the gate on my first day. He was 60-ish, with the kind of face that stopped trying to look friendly. He handed me a binder, thick 3-ring corporate logo embossed on the cover. "Standard safety rules," he said. "Read them, follow them, don't improvise." His voice had the flatness of someone who'd said the same thing many times. He showed me the control room, the logbook, and the kitchen with its ancient coffee maker. He pointed to the radio. "Check in at midnight and 4 a.m. Don't miss it." Then he left. I was alone by 3 in the afternoon. I made coffee. I flipped through the binder. The rules were what you'd expect. Conduct hourly spillway inspections, report pressure anomalies, never disable alarms, and use fall protection on elevated surfaces. Bureaucratic, vague, full of phrases like ensure compliance and maintain situational awareness. I skimmed most of it. Then I opened my locker, assigned my name on a laminated card, and found the second set of rules. A folded sheet of paper, oil-stained, the edges soft from handling. The handwriting was neat but hurried, written in blue ink that had faded to gray in places. At the top, in capital letters, "Real rules, do not mix with the other ones." I laughed. I actually laughed. I thought it was hazing. Some joke Dennis played on every new hire to see if they'd spook, but I read them anyway because I had 2 weeks of nights ahead and nothing else to do. The corporate binder said, "Conduct spillway walk once per hour." The handwritten sheet said, "Do not walk the spillway between 11 and 1. The water will count you." The corporate binder said, "Record all readings in the digital log." The handwritten sheet said, "If the turbine readings, Spell a word. Do not speak it aloud. The corporate binder said, report unusual sounds immediately. The handwritten sheet said, if you hear knocking in sets of 3, respond with 2 knocks, never 3. I folded the paper and put it back in the locker. I told myself I wouldn't think about it. I told myself rules were just procedures, safety theater, the illusion of control in a job that didn't matter. Then I checked the time. The clock on the control room wall read 3:47 p.m. My phone read 3:38 p.m. I walked into the kitchen. The microwave clock read 3:47 p.m. I stepped into the tunnel access hallway. The clock there, analog, institutional, the kind that ticks loudly, read 3:38 p.m., exactly 9 minutes apart, depending on where I stood. I went back to the control room and stared at the wall clock. I counted 60 seconds on my phone. The wall clock advanced 60 seconds, no discrepancy in speed, just position. I walked back to the tunnel, same thing, 3:39 p.m. Now, always 9 minutes behind. I stood in the threshold between the 2 rooms, 1 foot in each, and felt a pressure in my ears like a rapid altitude change. My phone flickered. For a moment, the screen showed both times at once, overlapping, the numbers smeared like wet ink. Then it chose. 3:48 p.m. I chose the control room. I closed the tunnel door. That's when I heard the first horn. One long note, low and resonant like a ship's horn, but deeper, felt more than heard. It vibrated through the floor, through my teeth. I checked the alarm panel. Nothing. I checked the radio. Static. I looked out the window toward the spillway. The fog was rising in a straight vertical line like a curtain pulled upward by invisible hands. I opened the corporate binder and flipped through emergency procedures. Nothing about a horn. I opened my locker and unfolded the handwritten sheet. At the bottom, in smaller letters, almost an afterthought, if you hear the water horn before your first midnight, you are in the wrong shift. Do not leave the building until the fog decides. I looked back out the window. The fog hadn't moved. It stood there, patient, between me and my truck. I realized I didn't know which shift I was in. I realized I didn't know if I'd ever left. I decided to treat the first night like a test. I would be rational. I would follow the corporate binder because that's what kept people employed, insured, and legally protected. The handwritten rules were folklore, the paranoid scribbles of someone who'd worked here too long, someone who'd let the isolation turn shadows into mythology. I told myself this. I wrote it in the margin of my notebook. Stay practical. Don't invent patterns. The control house felt safe, enclosed. The hum of the equipment was constant, almost comforting, like white noise. I sat at the desk and worked through the checklist. Turbine pressure readings, spillway gate positions, water temperature and flow rate, all normal. Except the turbines shouldn't have been running at all. The dam was decommissioned. That's what Dennis said. That's what the paperwork said. But the readouts showed active generation. Low output, barely a trickle, but consistent. I wrote it down. I noted the discrepancy. I did my job. At 8 p.m., I put on my jacket and headed for the spillway walk. The corporate binder required hourly inspections. I had a clipboard, a flashlight, and a radio clipped to my belt. I felt official. I felt like I was doing something that mattered, even if it didn't. The moment I stepped outside, the air changed. It wasn't just colder, it was wet in a way that didn't come from rain. The humidity clung to my skin like a film. The sound of the spillway was louder than it should have been, roaring, relentless, a noise that made thinking difficult. My phone lost signal immediately. The radio hissed with static, then cleared, and I heard Dennis's voice. Walk through at 1800, confirm position. I pressed the transmit button. This is Mason, starting spillway inspection. Silence. Then the static returned, but underneath it I heard something else. A voice. Dennis's voice, but clipped, reading from something. The cadence was wrong, formal, like a script. Confirm position at primary gate, mark interval, do not acknowledge secondary calls. Dennis, I said. What secondary calls? The static cut out. Silence. Just the water. I kept walking. The catwalk was a metal grating, see-through, suspended over the spillway channel. Below, black water surged, crashing against concrete walls worn smooth by decades of flow. The fog rose from it in slow, thick columns, smelling of river stones and something else. Copper, maybe, or old iron. That's when I saw the boot prints. Fresh, wet, leading toward the spill gates. I stopped. I turned my flashlight on them. The treads were clear, recent, and water still pooled in the deeper grooves. I looked ahead. The prints continued along the catwalk, past the gate control panel, right up to the railing at the far end. Then they stopped. No return prints, no prints leading off the catwalk. Just stopped, as if whoever made them had stepped over the railing into the water. I walked to the railing and shone my light down. The water was black, frothing white at the edges where it hit concrete. I couldn't see the bottom. I couldn't see anything that might have fallen. I looked back at the prints. I measured my own boot next to one. Same size, same thread. My stomach tightened. I returned to the control house faster than I should have, almost jogging, my breath fogging in the spillway air. Inside, I locked the door. I sat at the desk. I checked the security monitor. The dam had 4 cameras, one on the main gate, one in the parking lot, one in the tunnel access, and one on the spillway walk. I rewound the spillway feed to 1800 hours, 8 p.m., when I'd gone outside. The footage showed me walking onto the catwalk, clipboard in hand, flashlight beam cutting through fog. I watched myself move toward the spill gates exactly as I remembered. But the timestamp on the video read 7:51 p.m., 9 minutes early. I checked my watch, 8:22 p.m. I rewound further. At 7:51, the camera showed me stepping onto the catwalk. At 7:52, I was halfway to the gate. At 7:53, I stopped. On screen, I stood still, staring at the railing. Then, for less than a second, so brief I almost missed it, another figure appeared behind me. Blurred, indistinct. Taller than me, or maybe closer to the camera, perspective warped by the fog. It stood there, just behind my shoulder, and then the frame skipped and it was gone. I rewound again. I watched frame by frame. The figure wasn't there. It had never been there. But the audio track, I turned up the volume, contained something. A whisper, soft, almost inaudible under the water's roar. Wrong side. I stopped the playback. I sat in the quiet hum of the control room. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was compression artifacts, bad equipment, electromagnetic interference from the turbines. I told myself anything except what I was starting to believe, that the dam could store different versions of the same moment, that time here didn't run in one direction, that I was being watched by something that didn't need eyes. I opened the handwritten rules again. If the security feed shows you before you arrive, do not watch yourself leave. I looked at the monitor. The live feed showed the empty catwalk, fog drifting across the grates. I had already watched myself leave. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what I'd just done wrong. At midnight, I made the required radio check-in. Dennis answered, sounding normal, bored even. I asked him about the boot prints. He said nobody else was on site. I asked about the timestamp discrepancy. He said the cameras were old. The system had quirks, don't worry about it. I asked him if anyone had ever drowned during a spillway walk. He paused. Then, not recently. What does that mean? It means do your job, Mason. Don't go looking for problems. The radio clicked off. I sat alone in the control house listening to the hum. watching the clock on the wall tick forward while my phone lagged 9 minutes behind, and I understood something I didn't want to understand. The dam was teaching me that reality here was conditional, that the rules weren't about safety, they were about choosing which version of the truth you wanted to survive. On the third night, I met someone who shouldn't have been there. I was in the service tunnels checking a pressure gauge that had been reading amber since my shift started. The corporate binder said amber was advisory, monitor but don't act. The handwritten rules said nothing about amber. They only mentioned red. If any gauge reaches red and the turbines are silent, evacuate immediately. Do not use the main exit. The tunnels were colder than the control house, the air stale and dense. Caged lights ran along the ceiling in intervals, casting overlapping circles of yellow on concrete walls painted industrial gray. Someone had marked the walls with arrows, spray-painted, pointing toward different exits and access points, but the arrows didn't match the layout on the map Dennis had given me. One arrow pointed at a wall with no door. Another pointed down at the floor. I was checking the gauge, still amber, pressure holding steady, when I heard footsteps behind me. Not the echo of my own steps, different rhythm, heavier. I turned, flashlight raised. A woman stood about 20 feet down the corridor, wearing a maintenance jacket I'd never seen issued. Dark green with a patch on the shoulder I couldn't quite read in the dim light. She was late 20s maybe, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Hands in her pockets, expression calm. She looked at me like I was the one out of place. "You're early," she said. I stared. "What?" "You're supposed to arrive after the first horn." She stepped closer, and I noticed her boots, same treads as the prints I'd seen on the catwalk. "You came in before, that's why you're seeing overlaps." "Who are you?" I didn't lower the flashlight. "This is a solo assignment. Nobody's supposed to be here." She smiled, not unkindly. "You keep saying that. Doesn't make it true." She gestured at the tunnel around us. "You think you're the only shift? You think the dam only runs one version?" "One version of what?" "Of now?" She said it simply, like it was obvious. "I'm Lila Vance. I work in maintenance, third cycle. You're Mason, right? You wrote your full name in the logbook. You shouldn't have done that." My chest tightened. I had signed the logbook. First page, first entry, full. Signature. Standard procedure. "Why not?" Lila pulled a folded paper from her jacket pocket and held it out. "Because names are anchors. You just tied yourself to whichever version of the dam you read at first." I took the paper. It was a rule sheet, printed, not handwritten, but annotated heavily in blue pen, notes crowding the margins, some words circled, others crossed out. The header read, "Operational Guidelines, Revised Maintenance Protocol." The rules were different from both sets I'd seen. Lila's rules said, if you hear the water horn once, you have 10 minutes to reach the control house. If you hear it twice, do not move. If you hear it 3 times, you were never here. I hadn't heard a horn since the first day. Or had I? My memory felt slippery. Never write your full name in the logbook, initials only, names are addresses. If you see your reflection in the turbine observation window, do not check your face, check your hands. I looked up at her. These don't match the rules I was given. I know. She took the paper back, refolding it carefully. That's the problem. There are at least 3 sets in circulation, maybe more. They contradict each other because the dam isn't consistent. It's running multiple shifts simultaneously. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes one bleeds into another. She looked at me closely. "You've felt it, right? The time jumps, the 9 minutes." I nodded slowly. "You're in between," she said. "You started in one shift, but you're drifting into another. It happens when you break a rule you didn't know existed, or when the dam chooses you. Chooses me for what? Lila didn't answer immediately. She walked past me, checking the pressure gauge I'd been monitoring. She tapped it twice. The needle dropped to green. There, she said. It was lying. How did you? Because I've been here longer than you. Long enough to know the equipment lies. Long enough to know the dam tests you. She turned back to me. Mason Hart, you drowned here when you were 11. The words hit like cold water. What? The field trip, your class. You fell into the spillway channel. They pulled you out after 10 minutes. Technically, you were dead. No heartbeat. They brought you back. She watched my reaction carefully. You don't remember, do you? I remembered river rocks. I remembered a teacher yelling. I remembered waking up at home with a headache. My mother sitting beside my bed, her face pale and strange. I remembered being told I'd gotten sick, that I'd fainted, that it was nothing serious. I didn't remember drowning. You're lying, I said. Am I? Lila tilted her head. How did you get the job here, Mason? You applied under a fake resume. You're running from something. A hit and run you won't talk about. You think it's a coincidence you ended up back here? My throat tightened. I hadn't told anyone about the accident. I hadn't even let myself think about it clearly. Just flashes, headlights, a sound like a branch breaking, the sick thud of impact. I'd kept driving. I'd told myself it wasn't fatal. I'd never checked. The dam calls people back, Lila said quietly. People who owe it something. People who left debts. That's insane. Yeah. She laughed, bitter. It is. But you're standing in a tunnel where the clocks don't agree and the cameras record you 9 minutes out of sync. So maybe insane is relative. I wanted to argue. I wanted to walk away. But the pressure gauge behind her, now reading green, impossibly green, made me hesitate. Why are you here? I asked. Same reason as you, she said. I didn't leave right the first time. Before I could ask what that meant, a sound echoed through the tunnel, low, resonant, vibrating through the concrete. The horn. One long note. Lila's face went tight. You need to move now, 10 minutes to the control house. What happens if I don't? She looked at me like I'd asked a stupid question. Then you'll find out what happens after the horn stops counting. She turned and ran, her footsteps echoing, fading into the tunnels. I stood frozen for 3 seconds, maybe 4. Then I ran too. I reached the control house with time to spare, maybe. The clock on the wall said I'd made it. My phone said I was 2 minutes late. I checked the security feed. The tunnel camera showed Lila and me running, but the timestamp was wrong again. And in the background, behind us, something else moved through the frame. Tall, blurred, keeping pace. The audio track carried a whisper I hadn't heard while running. He wrote his name. He's anchored now. I turned off the monitor. I sat in the dark hum of the control house and realized I wasn't working alone. I was working in a place where being alone didn't mean what I thought it did. The alarm woke me from a half-sleep I didn't remember entering. I'd been sitting at the desk, staring at the logbook, trying to remember what I'd written on the first page. My handwriting looked wrong, too neat, too deliberate, like someone had traced over my signature. I couldn't recall doing it. But it was there, Mason Hart, full name, black ink, binding me to something I didn't understand. The alarm was a steady electronic pulse, not loud but insistent. I checked the panel. Spill gate number 3. Abnormal pressure. I opened the corporate binder, flipping to emergency procedures. The protocol was clear. Abnormal gate pressure requires immediate manual inspection. Access via spillway catwalk. Visual confirmation mandatory. Record findings in log. I looked at my watch. 10:47 p.m. Still within the safe window according to the handwritten rules. The spillway walk was forbidden between 11 and 1, but I had 13 minutes, plenty of time. I stood, pulling on my jacket. Then I hesitated. I pulled out the handwritten sheet from my pocket, unfolding it under the desk lamp. The relevant rule: if gate pressure spikes without rainfall, do not approach. Bleed off power and wait for the river to settle. I checked the weather monitor. No rainfall. Skies clear. The pressure spike had no obvious cause. 2 rules, 2 different instructions. I stood in the space between them, trying to decide which one would keep me alive. That's when I heard the door to the tunnels open behind me. Lila stepped in, breathless, her jacket soaked through like she'd been standing in the spillway mist. "Don't go out there. The alarm is bait." She crossed the room, checking the monitors, the pressure readouts. "This is what it does. It creates a scenario that matches one rule set but violates another. You're being tested." "Tested for what?" "To see which reality you choose." She pointed at the corporate binder. "If you follow that, you'll go outside, you'll do the inspection, and you'll feed it." "Feed what?" "Whatever the dam is becoming." She pulled out her own rule sheet, flipping to a page covered in annotations. "There's a third option. My rules say open the maintenance hatch in Tunnel 3 and listen first. The river will tell you which reality you're in." I stared at her. "That doesn't make sense." "None of this makes sense, Mason. But you have to choose. Now. You've got 12 minutes before the window closes." I looked at the 3 options in front of me. Follow corporate protocol, go outside, inspect the gate, official, documented, safe, according to the reality where paperwork protects you. Follow the handwritten rules, bleed off power, wait. Trust that something older than the company knows better. Follow Lila's version, go into the tunnels. Listen to the river. Trust a woman I'd met less than a day ago in a place that shouldn't have other people. I made my choice. I grabbed the corporate binder and headed for the door. "Mason, don't." "I'm doing my job," I said. "If I don't follow protocol, I'm liable. If something happens and I didn't inspect—" "You still think liability matters here?" Lila's voice was sharp, almost desperate. "You think your employment contract is going to protect you from—" But I was already outside. The spillway air hit me like a wall. Cold, wet, electric. The roar of water was louder than before, angrier, as if the river knew I was coming. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped onto the catwalk. The fog was rising, not drifting, rising. In a straight vertical line like before, a curtain was pulled upward by something beneath the water. It formed a wall between me and gate number 3, perfectly still, defying wind and current. I kept walking. My boots clanged on metal grating. The sound echoed wrong, doubling back as if the catwalk was longer than it should be. That's when I heard the horn. One long note, deep, resonant, felt in my bones, my teeth, the base of my skull. It didn't come from the dam. It came from inside the water, rising through the spillway like a voice from something submerged. I stopped. The fog began to move. It shifted horizontally now, curling around the catwalk railings, threading through the grating beneath my feet. It moved with intention, not randomly, as if it were searching. I heard my own breathing, too loud, too fast. Then I heard Lila's voice behind me. "Mason, listen." But her voice arrived after I saw her mouth move. She was standing 10 feet back near the control house door, and her lips were forming words I couldn't hear yet. The sound lagged behind by seconds like a badly dubbed film. She was shouting something, a rule I didn't know, but the words reached me scrambled, out of order. "Don't look! The water! Your face, not yours!" I turned toward gate number 3. The pressure panel was lit red now, flashing. I approached the observation window, a thick glass porthole set into the gate mechanism used for visual flow checks. I looked down into the water. I saw my own face looking back, but it wasn't my reflection. The face in the water was smiling. Wide. Too wide. The expression was wrong, proud, eager, like it had been waiting for me to see it. The eyes were mine, but brighter, more awake than I'd ever felt. The face mouthed something. I couldn't hear it through the glass and water and noise, but I read the lips. Thank you. Then the thing below grabbed the underside of the catwalk railing. I saw the fingers thread through the metal, human fingers, too long, joints bending in ways that weren't right. They gripped the railing from below, pulling, testing the bolts. I stumbled backward. The fog surged around me, thick and disorienting. I couldn't see the control house. I couldn't see Lila. I ran, boots slipping on wet grating, the horn still vibrating through everything. I don't remember reaching the door. I don't remember crossing the threshold. But suddenly I was inside, gasping, the door slamming shut behind me. Lila was there, staring at me with something between pity and fury. "You looked," she said. "What was that?" "You gave it a better imitation." Her voice was flat. "You just showed it what Mason Hart looks like when he's scared. Now it knows. Now it can practice." I sank into the chair, my hands shaking. The alarm had stopped. The monitors showed gate number 3 pressure returning to normal. Green, as if nothing had happened. Lila sat across from me, pulling out her rule sheet. She added a new note in the margin, her handwriting tight and angry. Mason looked. Do not trust his face anymore. "What does that mean?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just folded the paper and put it away. Outside, through the window, the fog settled back down over the spillway. Calm, patient, waiting for the next test. I stopped trusting the maps after I found the 4th corridor. The corporate map Dennis had given me showed 3 main areas: control house, spillway access, and service tunnels A and B. Simple, linear, everything labeled, everything accounted for. But when I compared it to the older map I'd found rolled up in a storage closet, yellowed paper, brittle at the creases, dated 1974, there was a discrepancy. The old map showed a 4th corridor, sluice access, sealed 1983. I checked the location on the tunnel level. According to the map, it should have been behind the pressure gauge where I'd first met Lila, accessible through a maintenance door marked with a red stripe. The door existed. But it wasn't marked red, it was gray, no signage, no warning labels. And when I touched it, the metal was warm, not hot, just warm, as if something was running behind it. I pressed my ear to the door. I heard water moving, not the roar of the spillway, but something slower, deliberate, like breathing. I tried the handle, locked. Lila appeared behind me so quietly that I jumped. "You found it." "Found what?" "The source point." She stood beside me, staring at the door like it was an old enemy. "That's where it started, where the dam stopped being just concrete and water." "What do you mean?" She was quiet for a moment, then. "The renovation. 2011. They poured new concrete into old water channels. They blocked routes the river used to take. They redirected flow through modern turbines, tried to make it efficient, optimized, controlled." She looked at me. "But the river had been moving through this valley for 10,000 years. You can't just change that. Not without consequence." "You're saying the river is alive?" "I'm saying the river learned." Lila pulled a key from her pocket. Old brass, worn smooth. "When they blocked the natural channels, something backed up, not water. Something older. And it started testing the new structure. Testing the people inside it." She unlocked the door. The air that sighed out was cold and metallic, tasting of rust and river stones. Beyond the threshold, a narrow staircase descended into darkness, lit by a single caged bulb at the bottom. "Are we going down there?" I asked. "You want answers, don't you?" Lila started down the stairs without waiting for a response. I followed. The staircase ended in a chamber I hadn't known existed, a wide, low-ceilinged room carved directly into bedrock, older than the dam itself. The walls were rough stone, not concrete. The floor was damp, puddled in places, water seeping up through invisible cracks. And covering every surface, walls, ceiling, support beams, were marks, pencil marks, scratched names, dates, tallies. I stepped closer, shining my flashlight across the walls. Some names I recognized from the logbook upstairs. Some were decades old, barely legible. Many were scratched out so violently the stone was gouged beneath them as if someone had tried to erase them from existence. I found one name repeated 17 times in different hands, different years. Sarah Eng. My chest tightened. My classmate. The girl who'd gone missing during the field trip. I remembered her face now, pale and silent when she returned. I remembered her eyes, looking through us, not at us. She came back, I said quietly. Did she? Leela was crouched near the center of the chamber, examining something on the floor. Or did something else come back wearing her face? I didn't answer. I kept reading the walls. More names, more dates. I found my own name once in handwriting I didn't recognize. Mason Hart, 2003. The year of the field trip, the year I drowned and didn't remember drowning. Then I found something that stopped me cold, a plastic bracelet, the kind they give kids at school events. It was wedged into a gap between stones, faded but intact. I pulled it out. The letters were barely visible, but I could still read them. Mason Hart, Hillcrest Elementary. I'd worn this. I remembered the field trip coordinator snapping it onto my wrist. I remembered pulling at it, annoyed by how tight it was. I didn't remember taking it off. Lila. She was staring at the far end of the chamber where the rock walls gave way to something else, newer concrete, poured in clean industrial lines. The seam where old met new was visible, a jagged border like scar tissue. This is where they did it, she said, where they poured the new foundation into the old water paths. They didn't just build on top of the river, they tried to replace it. She stood walking to the seam. That's when the rules started. That's when people started finding contradictory instructions because the dam was learning how to speak. Speak to who? To anyone it could anchor. She looked back at me. You drowned here, Mason. For 10 minutes you were dead in this water. That's a bond. That's a debt the river remembers. My hands were shaking. I shoved the bracelet into my pocket. So what, I'm cursed? Is that what you're saying? I'm saying you're tied to this place, and places like this don't let go easily. She gestured at the chamber. This is the source point, where the old river meets the new structure, where the rules overlap and contradict because two realities are trying to exist in the same space. I looked at the walls again, at the names, the tally marks. How many people have been anchored? I don't know. Dozens, maybe. Some escape, some don't. Lila walked toward the far wall where two doors stood side by side, both labeled Control in stenciled letters. The left door was clean, well lit by overhead lights, modern, safe. The right door was damp, the paint peeling, smelling of river stones and copper. Old, wrong. Lila stood between them. This is the choice point. Every anchored person reaches it eventually. Two doors. Two versions of the control house, two realities. You can only leave through one. What happens if I choose wrong? You don't leave at all. She turned to me, her expression unreadable. Or you leave into a version of the world that isn't quite yours. Close but not identical. You'll notice small things, differences, and you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if you're really home. I stared at the doors. They looked identical except for the decay. How do I know which one is real? You don't, Lila stepped aside. That's the test. I reached for the left door, the clean one, the safe one. My hand touched the handle. Both doors opened. The light from the left spilled into the chamber, bright and fluorescent. The darkness from the right sighed outward, carrying the smell of river water. I stood frozen between them. Somewhere above us, muffled by stone and concrete, I heard the horn. Again. Twice. 2 long notes. Lila's face went pale. That's new. What does 2 horns mean? She pulled out her rule sheet, scanning frantically. Then she stopped. Her voice was barely a whisper. If you hear it twice, do not move. We stood perfectly still in the chamber between 2 open doors, while something in the darkness beyond the right door began to breathe. We didn't move for 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Time felt negotiable in the source chamber, elastic, like it was waiting to see what we'd do. The breathing from beyond the right door was steady, slow, rhythmic, not human. Too deep, too patient. It sounded like something large had learned to mimic respiration without needing it. Lila's hand was on my arm, gripped tight. Her rule sheet was shaking in her other hand. She mouthed something without sound. Don't look. I looked anyway. Through the right doorway in the darkness that smelled of copper and river stones, I saw movement. A shape. Tall. Enough that it had to be crouching, shoulders hunched against the low ceiling. It swayed slightly back and forth like it was listening to music only it could hear. Then it spoke. Mason, it said in my mother's voice. Come here, sweetheart. You're supposed to be home. My stomach dropped. It's learning, Lila whispered. It's pulling voices from you. Don't respond. But the voice continued, warm and concerned, exactly as I remembered it from childhood. You've been gone so long, I've been worried. Come back, it's time. I took a step toward the right door before I realized I was moving. Lila yanked me back hard. No, that's not your mother. That's not even wearing your mother, it's just sound. The shape in the darkness tilted its head. I could see the motion even without details, the way predators move when they've located prey. Then it spoke again, this time in Dennis's voice, flat and bureaucratic. Mason, you need to file a report. Protocol requires documentation. Come through and sign the paperwork. Then Lila's voice, calm and rational. Mason, I'm already through the door. This is the real exit. You can trust me. Lil beside me said nothing, her face pale. The thing was cycling through voices now faster, testing which one would work. My father, my high school teacher, the 911 operator I'd heard after the hit and run, then Sarah Eng, my classmate from the field trip, her voice small, distant. Mason, I'm still here. You left me. Come help, please. I closed my eyes. How do I make it stop? You don't. Lila pulled me toward the left door, the clean one, the lit one. You choose the other door and hope you're choosing right. But when I looked at the left door, I saw something that made me hesitate. On the wall beside the door frame, written in fresh pencil, was a note I hadn't noticed before. If you want to exit in the reality you entered, you must give the dam a replacement. Lila saw me reading it. Her expression changed, something between resignation and guilt. What does that mean? I asked. She didn't answer. I read it again. Lila, what does that mean? It means there's a cost. Her voice was quiet. You can leave, but not alone. Not without giving the dam something else to anchor. Anchor what? Another person? Or the idea of one? She looked away. A name, a confession, a lie that becomes true because you spoke it here. I stared at her. You knew about this? Yes. How long? Since the beginning. She finally met my eyes. Do you think I'm here by accident, Mason? Do you think I just happened to be working the same shift as you? My chest tightened. What are you? I'm someone who made the same choice you're about to make. She gestured at the chamber, the names on the walls. I gave the dam a name. I filed a report blaming someone else for a malfunction. I lied in a way that made the lie real. And I got out. She paused. For a while. What happened to the person you named? I don't know. I never checked. Her voice was flat, empty. Maybe they're still here. Maybe they're in one of the other shifts, living my time instead of theirs. Maybe they never existed at all, and I invented them to survive. I looked at the left door, then at the rule sets I'd been carrying. Corporate, handwritten, Lila's annotated pages. 3 versions, 3 contradictory instructions. There's a third option, I said slowly. Something that doesn't require replacing anyone. Lila shook her head. If there was, I would have found it. You didn't look hard enough. I pulled out the corporate binder, flipping to the communications section. There was a rule I'd overlooked, buried in dense paragraphs of HR policy. Report intruders immediately via the control room telephone. Then the handwritten rules. Never call anyone from the control house phone after midnight. And on the wall of the source chamber, etched into stone beneath a dozen crossed-out names, a lie spoken here becomes a door. I understood. The dam wanted a story. It wanted belief. It didn't care if the story was true, only if it was spoken with enough conviction to become real. I don't have to name a person, I said. I just have to name something the dam will believe. Lila's eyes widened. Mason, that's not... But I was already speaking, my voice echoing in the stone chamber. I confess to trespassing. I confess to falsifying my employment records. I confess to breaking protocol and entering restricted areas without authorization. The breathing from the right door stopped. I confess to the hit and run. I didn't stop. I didn't check. I left someone on the road and I drove away. My voice cracked. It was the first time I'd said it aloud. The first time I'd admitted what I'd done. I confessed to cowardice, to running, to believing I could hide here and the world wouldn't follow. The shape in the darkness shifted, listening. But I don't confess to drowning. I don't confess to dying. I don't accept that debt. Silence. The chamber held its breath. I was 11 years old. Whatever pulled me under wasn't me. Whatever survived wasn't something I chose. I don't owe this place my life. Lila was staring at me, her expression unreadable. I turned to the left door. I'm leaving and I'm not naming anyone else. I stepped through. The world lurched. I felt the 9-minute gap like a physical sensation, my body stretching across the distance between 2 versions of the same moment. For a second, I existed in both, standing in the source chamber and standing in the control house, overlapping, superimposed. Then the world chose. I was in the control house, alone. The lights were on. The monitors showed empty hallways and empty spillway. The clock read 4:47 a.m. I checked my phone. 4:38 a.m., 9 minutes apart still. But the air felt different, lighter, like something had released its grip. I looked at the logbook. My signature was gone. The page was blank except for a single line in handwriting I didn't recognize. Mason Hart declined replacement protocol. Exit granted under conditional parole. Conditional. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't want to know. I grabbed my jacket and walked out the main door into the dawn. My truck was in the parking lot exactly where I'd left it. The dam stood behind me, silent, fog rising from the spillway in slow, lazy columns. I got in the truck and drove. I didn't look back. I made it to the county road before the radio turned on by itself. The truck's stereo had been off, I was sure of it. I'd been driving in silence, windows down, cold morning air rushing through the cab, trying to convince myself I was awake and real and leaving. Then the speakers crackled. Mason, Dennis's voice, flat, procedural. You didn't file an exit report. Protocol requires documentation before departure. I reached for the power button. It was already off. Mason, this is a safety issue. Return to the control house and complete the paperwork. I turned the volume knob all the way down. The voice didn't get quieter. Mason. Different voice now. Lila's, calm and reasonable. You made a mistake. You didn't choose a door. You walked between them. You're still in the source chamber. This is a projection. You need to wake up. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. Solid. Real. I could feel the ridges of the plastic, the vibration of the engine. Mason! My mother's voice worried. Sweetheart, you're not supposed to leave. You made a promise when you were 11. You remember, don't you? You promised you'd come back. I didn't remember promising anything. The road ahead looked wrong, not dramatically, just slightly. The trees were too symmetrical. The curve of the asphalt is too perfect, like a memory of a road rather than the road itself. I kept driving. Mason. Sarah Eng's voice was small and frightened. You left me. You went home and I stayed. It's been 20 years, please, I'm still in the water. My hands tightened on the wheel. The voice shifted again, mid-sentence. Dennis's bureaucratic tone melting into something else. Smoother, more curious, almost amused. You're clever. Most people choose. You refused. That's interesting. This wasn't a recording. This was something speaking in real time. What are you? I said aloud. The radio static cleared. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, we're the part that backed up, the part that couldn't drain. When they poured new concrete, they didn't ask where the old water would go. So we stayed. We learned the shape of the structure. We learned the shape of the people inside it. The voice wasn't mimicking anyone now. It was its own thing, layered, multiple tones speaking in imperfect unison. You confessed. That was clever. You gave us truth instead of a name, but truth is slippery, Mason. You said you don't owe us your life, but you didn't say you didn't die. The road ahead shimmered. For a second I saw two versions, one leading into morning light, the other curving back toward the dam. You walked out of the source chamber, the voice continued. But which door did you use? I looked in the rearview mirror. The dam was still visible, smaller now but present. The fog rising from the spillway was thicker than before, darker, spreading across the valley like a stain. You're in between, Mason. You refused to choose, so now you exist in both. Schrodinger's survivor, alive in one reality, drowned in another. We're very curious to see which one collapses first. The radio clicked off. I drove faster. The sun was rising, but the light felt thin, unconvincing. I passed a sign, Hillcrest, 40 miles. I'd never heard of Hillcrest. The nearest town was Ridgemont, 60 miles south. I pulled over, checking my phone. No signal. The map app showed my location, but the roads were labeled differently. Street names I didn't recognize. The river, marked clearly on every map I'd ever seen, wasn't there. Just empty topography, as if the water had never existed. I looked at the date on my phone. March 14th, 2024. I'd started my shift on March 11th. 3 days had passed. I got back on the road. 20 minutes later, I passed a billboard. River Dam Tours. Open daily. Historical site. I slowed. The dam had never been open for tours. It was decommissioned, restricted, and barely maintained. I kept driving. The next town I reached wasn't Ridgemont. It was smaller, older, the buildings worn in a way that suggested decades of slow decline. The sign at the town limit said, "Welcome to Ashford." I'd never heard of Ashford. I stopped at a gas station. The attendant was young, disinterested, scrolling through his phone. I asked him how far to the dam. "Which dam?" he said without looking up. The Hillcrest River Dam. Never heard of it. I stared at him. It's 20 miles north. You can see it from the Ridge Road. He shrugged. There's no dam up there, man, just forest and some old ruins. They were going to build something in the 80s, but it got shut down. Funding issues or something. Shut down? Yeah, never finished. It's all overgrown now. I left without buying anything. I drove back toward the dam, following the route I'd memorized. The road was the same, the trees were the same, but when I reached the site, the gate was different. Older, rusted, chained shut. The signage was faded, barely readable. Construction site. No trespassing. Hillcrest Hydro Project. Abandoned. I parked and walked through the broken fence. The dam was there. But it was wrong. Half finished. Concrete was poured but never completed. Rebar jutting from unfinished walls. The control house was a shell, windows empty, roof partially collapsed. Nature had reclaimed most of it, vines, moss, saplings growing through cracked foundations. But the spillway was intact, functional. Water flowed through it, roaring as if the dam had been operating for decades. I walked to the edge. The water was black, frothing white at the edges. I saw boot prints in the mud, fresh, recent, same treads as mine. I saw a figure standing on the far side of the spillway. Lila? Or someone who looked like her. She waved. I didn't wave back. I returned to my truck and found something on the passenger seat that hadn't been there before. A binder, clean, corporate logo embossed on the cover. Standard Safety Rules, Revision 2. I opened it. The first page was a handwritten note. Welcome back, Mason. This time, try not to lie. I threw the binder out the window and drove. I drove until the gas tank was empty, until the road turned to gravel, until I couldn't see the dam in any direction. But I could still hear the horn. Faint, distant, 3 long notes repeating. If you hear it 3 times, you were never here. I pulled over and checked my wallet. My driver's license was there, but the name was wrong. The address was wrong. The photo showed my face, but younger, thinner, like it were taken years ago. I checked my phone. The contacts were different. Numbers I didn't recognize. My own name wasn't saved anywhere. I sat in the truck as the sun climbed higher, trying to remember who I'd been before I took the job. Trying to remember if I'd ever left. I couldn't. The only thing I knew for certain was that somewhere in another version of this moment, Mason Hart was still working the night shift. And I was driving his roads, wearing his face, trying to find a reality where I belonged. I didn't go back to the dam, not intentionally. But 3 weeks later, I found myself driving past the same county road, the same rusted gate, the same faded sign about an abandoned construction project. I told myself it was a coincidence. I told myself I was just passing through. I was lying. The truth was I couldn't leave, not completely. Some part of me was still anchored, tied to the concrete and water and the 9-minute gap between versions of myself. I felt it at night when I tried to sleep in motel rooms that all looked identical. I felt it when I checked my phone and saw the clock stutter, jumping backward, correcting itself. I felt it when I looked in mirrors and saw myself smiling too widely. So I went back. Not to work, not to file reports, but to finish what I'd started. I parked outside the gate at dusk, when the light was failing and the fog began to rise from the spillway. I climbed through the broken fence, moving quickly, my boots crunching on gravel that shouldn't have been there if the dam was truly abandoned. The control house was exactly as I'd left it, half-collapsed, overgrown. But the door was unlocked. Inside, the equipment was dead, covered in dust, but the desk was clean. The logbook sat open to the first page. My name was there again. Full signature, black ink. And below it in different handwriting, Lila Vance. Below that, Sarah Eng. below that, dozens of names stretching back decades all the way to 1983. I understood now the dam didn't trap people, it cycled them. Each person who refused to choose, who tried to walk between realities, became part of the system. We were all here, overlapping, existing in different shifts, meeting each other in the gaps. I heard footsteps behind me. Lila stood in the doorway, but she looked different, older, tired. Her maintenance jacket was torn, stained with something dark. "You came back," she said. "I couldn't leave." "No one does, not really." She stepped inside, checking the monitors that shouldn't have worked but did, flickering, showing grainy footage of empty hallways, fog-drenched catwalks. "The dam is patient. It knows you'll return, they always do." "I'm not staying." "Then why are you here?" Good question. I didn't have a good answer. I looked at the logbook again. How many people are stuck in this cycle? "I don't know. More every year." She sat at the desk, pulling out her annotated rule sheet, now covered in so many notes that the original text was barely visible. "I used to think there was a way out, a correct sequence of choices, but I think the truth is simpler." "What truth?" "There is no correct sequence. The rules contradict because the dam wants them to. It's not testing us, it's farming us." "Farming?" "Attention, fear, belief. Whatever it is that the dam needs to exist, we provide it. Every time we follow a rule, we reinforce its reality. Every time we choose a door, we validate its structure." I stared at her. "So the only way out is to stop playing." She looked up at me. "To do something irrational. Something the rules don't account for." I thought about that, about the source chamber, about the two doors I'd walked between instead of choosing, about the confession I'd given, truth instead of lies, refusal instead of compliance. "I didn't choose a door," I said slowly. "I went through the gap between them." Lila nodded. "And that's why you're still partially here. You broke the binary. You introduced a third option that the dam didn't expect. So how do I finish it? You go back to the source chamber, and you close the gap." We descended into the tunnels together, following the old map, passing through corridors that flickered between finished and unfinished, concrete and raw stone. The 9-minute gap was widening. I could feel it, a physical pressure in my chest, like being in two places at once was stretching me. Too thin. The sealed door was open. We went down the stairs into the source chamber. The names on the walls had multiplied, crowding every surface, some written over others until the stone was layered with decades of desperate documentation. The two doors, clean and corroded, lit and dark, stood open just as I'd left them. But now there was a third. Between the two, where there should have been only a stone wall, a narrow opening had appeared. Rough. Jagged. Like the dam itself had split open to accommodate my refusal. Lila stopped at the threshold. "That's new." "That's the gap," I said. "That's where I went." The opening was barely wide enough for a person. Beyond it, I couldn't see anything. Not darkness, not light, just absence. A space where reality hadn't decided what to be. I heard the horn, 3 times. Long, resonant, vibrating through stone. Lila grabbed my arm. "Mason, if you go in there..." "I know. You might not come out." "I know. Or you might come out wrong." I looked at her. "I'm already wrong. I've been wrong since I was 11. She let go. I stepped into the gap. The sensation was indescribable. Not falling, not drowning, not anything with a physical analog. I was between moments, between breaths, between the version of myself who'd drowned and the version who'd survived. I saw both lives at once. In one, I'd died in the spillway. My body had been pulled out, resuscitated, and brought back. But something had stayed in the water. Some part of me that the river kept. In the other, I'd never fallen. The field trip had ended normally. Sarah Eng had been the one who drowned, not me. I'd gone home unchanged. Both were true, both were false. The dam had kept them overlapping, feeding on the contradiction. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the plastic bracelet, the one with my name from the field trip. I snapped it. The gap shuddered. I spoke aloud, my voice echoing, in the non-space. I choose neither. I don't accept the version where I died. I don't accept the version where I didn't. I choose the version where I survive by refusing your binary. The gap began to close. I felt pressure, immense, crushing, as two realities tried to collapse into one. I heard the horn, distorted now, angry like the dam was protesting. I kept speaking. I don't owe you a name. I don't owe you a confession. I don't owe you belief. You only exist because people choose to follow your rules, and I choose not to. The walls screamed, not with sound, but with light, fracturing, splitting into overlapping images of the same space at different times. I closed my eyes. I stopped trying to see which reality was real. I just moved forward, instinct guiding me through the collapsing gap, through the noise and pressure and wrongness until I opened my eyes. I was standing in a parking lot. Dawn light. Real sun, warm on my face. My truck was there. It was exactly where I'd parked it 3 weeks ago. I looked back. The dam was there. But it was different. Smaller. Quiet. No fog. No roar of water. Just an old concrete structure, obviously abandoned, obviously harmless. I walked to the fence. The gate was chained shut, rusted and undisturbed. The sign read, Hillcrest Hydro Project. Construction halted 1983. I pulled out my phone. The date was correct. The time was correct. No 9-minute gap. I checked my contacts. My name was there, my address, my life. I drove away. This time I didn't look back. 2 months later, I received a package. No return address. Just a plain box taped shut, delivered to my apartment. Inside, a binder, clean corporate logo, standard safety rules. Revision 3. And a handwritten note. Mason, we appreciate your feedback. Your suggestions have been incorporated into updated protocols. Please review at your earliest convenience. We look forward to your return. Management. I burned it, but sometimes late at night I still hear the horn. Faint, distant, coming from no direction I can name. And sometimes when I look in the mirror I see myself smiling just a little too wide. As if something learned my face and is still practicing. As if I didn't close the gap completely. As if I only traded one cycle for another. This one quieter, subtler, harder to detect. I don't know which reality I'm in anymore. I don't know if it matters. All I know is that somewhere in a version of this moment I can almost remember. Mason Hart is still working the night shift. And every time I think about the dam, the 9-minute gap widens just a little, pulling me back toward the source. Reminding me that some debts don't disappear when you refuse to pay them, they just wait, patient, like water that's learned to think, like concrete that's learned to remember, like a dam that's learned your name.